Star Wars. Young Jedi Knights. Jedi Under Siege, Chapter 14. While battles raged above the Jedi Academy and the jungle around it, Imperial Commando Orvac crept forward intent on his mission. He had left his TIE fighter behind in the wake of the explosions at the shield generator facility, but he would come back to it once he had finished here. For hours now he made his way secretly through this thick forest. Several trees burned in the jungle nearby, sending up coils of putrid smoke from the wet vegetation. He heard blaster fire and shouts and a distant hum of lightsabers. He kept low and quiet, not willing to risk giving away his position. Skywalker's Jedi had abandoned the great temple to engage in scattered skirmishes in the forest, leaving it open and unprotected for him to do his work. He approached the ancient edifice, still hidden by the jungle. Orvac saw black streaks in the thick stone, blaster scoring and scars from proton explosives dropped by the TIE bombers. The ubiquitous vines that clung to the pyramid's side had withered under fire and fallen away in heaps. One close explosion had wrecked the temple's hangar bay door, preventing Skywalker's fleet of guardian ships from launching. So Orvac thought. After all these millennia, this ancient structure had finally been damaged, but it wasn't damaged enough. He would take care of the rest. Moving carefully, ducking his helmeted head, he crept through the foliage, ripping up vines and uprooting ferns to clear the way until he finally emerged from the underbrush and stood behind the tall temple. Above, TIE fighters streaked like birds of prey across the sky. Orvac looked up, silently urging him on. To one side of the pyramid, he saw a newly laid flagstone courtyard. Across it, at the base of the stone structure, a darkened entrance stood open. Imagining what sort of fearful sorcerous exercises the Jedi students performed there, he stepped cautiously into the courtyard. Already weeds had begun to push up between the flagstones. The jungle would no doubt reclaim its own within a matter of months after he destroyed the temple, and it would be good riddance to this place, he thought. By then he hoped to be either back in the Shadow Academy or perhaps promoted to the officer rank on a Star Destroyer, if his mission, turned out well enough. When the fighting became particularly loud, proton bombs exploded in the jungle not far away, Orvac made his move. He rushed across the heavy flagstones to the dim doorway that led to the rebels' secret temple. He paused at the threshold for a moment, glad for his helmet, in case poisonous vapors might seep out from the interior. Who knew what booby traps the Jedi sorcerers might have laid? He used the sensors in his helmet to check for traps, but found none, which wasn't surprising since the Shadow Academy's attack had been completely unexpected. The Jedi Knights had no time to prepare. Orvac entered the Misasi Temple, shouldered his pack, raced down the corridors, unfamiliar with the layout of the pyramid. He saw living quarters, large dining halls, nothing of significance that he could destroy. He made his way down to the rubble-sealed hangar bay, where he thought he could plant his detonators to best effect and blow up all the rebel starfighters. But when he emerged from the turbolift, he squinted in the dim lightning, unable to believe what he saw. Orvac found only a single, sleek-looking ship, all curves and angles, nothing more. No fleet of spacecraft, no major defenses. He snorted in disbelief. Suddenly, alarms squealed out from the hangar bay. Flashing red lights stabbed at his eyes. A small, barrel-shaped droid hurtled toward him, whistling and screeching. Blue electric bolts sparked from a wielding arm that protruded from its cylindrical torso. Orvac slammed himself back into the turbolift, punching the controls to seal the doors. Could the Jedi have installed a force of assassin droids? Lethal weapon-wielding machines that would never, ever miss? But the doors sealed shut and the turbolift whisked him upward. His last glimpse showed him that the attacker was simply a lone astromech droid trundling across the floor, sounding the standard alarms installed in its base. Apparently, however, no one remained in the temple to hear them. He chuckled nervously. One astromech droid. It annoyed him when mere machines held too great a sense of their own importance. He no longer feared a trap. Orvac had to find a different place for his purposes anyway, some place more special. He finally located it in the highest level of the Great Pyramid. Taking the turbolift to the top and holding his blaster ready to shoot anyone who came out of the shadows, the Imperial Commando stepped into the grand audience chamber. Here the walls were polished and inlaid with multicolored stones. At one end of the rose a great stage from which Orvac could imagine the rebels gave lectures to their students. handing medals to each other after victories in the war against the rightful rulers in the galaxy, perhaps even performed their disgusting rituals. Yes, he thought. Perfect. Moving quickly, heart pounding with the thrill of accomplishing the mission that had already cost the life of his companion, Dareb, Orvag unslung his pack. He pulled off his black helmet to see better in the light that filtered through the temple skylights. Smoke blackened the sky outside. Like burnt paint brushed across the air, distant sounds of the continuing attack echoed like ricochets inside the audience chamber. But he heard no one else nearby, no movement. The temple was empty, and he had the time to work. Orvac strode up to the stage, boots thumping on the stone floor. Yes, that would be the best place, a central location where the incredible blast could reflect from all sides. He yanked off his heavy gloves so he could tinker with the fine electronic components. Working cautiously, he removed his 7 remaining high-powered detonators and linked them together. Then he plugged all of the explosives into a central countdown timer and spread them out like spokes of a wheel in the grand audience chamber. Yes, it would be a fine explosion. Ideally, when all the detonators went off simultaneously, the explosion would rip off the top of the temple like a volcano erupting. The shockwave would punch through the floor to the levels below and blast the walls outward. The entire pyramid would come tumbling down, no more than a pile of ancient rubble, as it deserved to be. Orvac returned to the central unit and fiddled with the controls, kneeling on the polished surface of the stage. He thought with smug satisfaction that no more rebels would ever lecture here. No more Jedi Knights would earn rebel ways. This room would no longer hold victory celebrations. Soon it would all be gone. Kneeling on the ground, Orvac keyed an initiating code. All around the chamber, detonator lights winked green, ready to go, waiting for him to send the final command. Surveying his handiwork, he smiled and pressed the activate button. The timer began to count down. Not much time left for the Jedi Academy. As he moved, resting his hand on the floor, Orvac caught a glimmer of motion out the corner of his eye. Something glittered and translucent, almost transparent. It had caught his reflection in the light somehow. He pulled out his blaster, remained in a protective crouch. "Who's there?" he called. Then he saw it again, an iridescent shape, sinuous, slithering toward him across the stage. But he lost sight of it once more. Orvac fired his blaster, gouging holes in the floor around him. Streaks of energy bolts ricocheted around him. He flattened himself on the stage, afraid of return fire. He couldn't see the shimmering, invisible thing anymore, and wondered what it could have been. Some sorcerer's trick, no doubt. He couldn't have dropped his guard, but the Jedi would never get him. Just then, Orvac felt needles of pain sting his hand. He looked down to see tiny droplets of blood welling in from 2 punctures in his palm, and a triangle head of some kind of viper, a glassy crystalline snake. "Hey!" he shouted. Before he could lash out at it, the crystal snake dropped away from him and slithered toward a narrow crack in the wall. Orvac saw a single spangle of light and the serpent disappeared. But by now he was beyond caring, because a warm fog of sleepiness had begun to steal over him. The pain from the snake bite had caught in his hand, dulled to a throb, and Orvac thought drowsily that a long sleep would only make it better. He collapsed into a deep slumber right beside the countdown timer. The numbers ticked inexorably downward.